updates from our end before we get into questions. And so we'll go through a couple of quick updates. Wanted to highlight that this is our weekly office hour. So if this is your first time joining, we have this occurrence for US and EMEA weekly from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time. And then if you have colleagues or individuals who are in the APAC time region, we meet on the second Wednesday of every month to be able to engage and hear more. And that's from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And all those links can get added from our calendar that we have as well. Just another call out from our updates we've been doing to docs. There have been a lot of things we've been going through, but from last week, I just wanted to call out again all the great updates you'll be seeing on vector store connectors. So if you haven't had a chance to go ahead and dive in and look further, there are some really good documents out now as well. And then we've been going through our backlogs by bucket. We've actually been doing some prioritization as well. So a lot of individuals will ask around roadmap and wanting to know what's coming as well. And so this is completely public to you. And if you want to go through and be able to see what we're working on, this is a great place to be able to do it. And I'll put the link in chat here shortly. And then I do want to highlight, we have a couple of new blogs since last week. The one in particular that I want to highlight is a great step-by-step guide that goes through the integration of building an AI dashboard between Semantic Kernel and Azure Monitor. And so we have someone with internal to Microsoft who's gone through and developed a really great blog and has code samples. So if you get a chance, would love to be able to have you read more. We also have some work on function calling and its JSON schema and Semantic Kernel Python as well, if you're interested in reading more. And we have a really great case study as well that is with KPMG and how they've been using Semantic Kernel and their own AI pieces that they've been integrating in. So that's all the updates I have for me. I'll put the links to the docs, backlog by buckets, and the blog as well in chat. But with that, I want to go and turn it over to Roger, and he's going to go through some of the OpenAI V2 updates that we're seeing and some of the pieces there. Roger, I'll go and stop sharing if you want to share out.
Yeah, Sophia, thank you very much for the time. So regarding the last month, we've got announced that we are working on the V2 for OpenAI Connector, which is an update based on the new OpenAI official SDK for .NET, and we got that almost done to be in a GA, which is general availability version. So we got yesterday the second release candidate for this regarding a functionality, the latest deployment from OpenAI, Beta 10 and Azure as well. So they had small bug fixes that were identified in the way. So we are really looking forward to get this one merged and available for Semantic Kernel as a GA for the next week. So I'm going to, through this session, explore a little bit of what are the changes through that. And I'm going to share really quick my screen here. Let me get this. Confirm if you can see my screen at the moment.
Yep, I can see. Can others see it as well?
Yep.
Perfect.
Perfect, great stuff. So here is the open of the learn Microsoft Docs from Semantic Kernel, and you can find this section within the Getting Support. We have a dedicated session for migrating OpenAI to the latest versions. So currently we had the release candidate 1, RC1 18.1. So any version after 1.18 you can expect to have the new version of the OpenAI connector. And throughout this guide are all the changes that are very few, to be honest. We spent the last 2 months really trying to avoid the most possible breaking changes. So the overall, if you are in a very common scenario using the OpenAI connector, in the Semantic Kernel, you would have to minimal or even none changes if you are using the OpenAI specific. But if you are using Azure, you might have very few changes, unless you are really using advanced specific types from the previous SDK from Azure. You might need to change something. So this is a very deep walkthrough on how you can migrate your previous version, previous to .18 version of the OpenAI SDK, OpenAI connector. And we have put into this guideline everything that if you find in the code, some specific term in the code that might be breaking for you, or you can find really easy in this manual. So the first thing that I would like to bring here is that for these new changes, we split the connectors. Before we had an OpenAI connector, which was mixing OpenAI and Azure OpenAI, and we managed to split those two connectors in different packages, one dedicated for OpenAI public APIs or specific endpoints, and one for Azure for OpenAI models. So we have this change, which if you were using, we are very specific to what is before and what is after. It's very straightforward here. So basically, if you were using any components targeting Azure, now all you have to do is really change the namespace, and that component might be there already for you. Right. So one thing to take note is if you're using a specific OpenAI client that was previous name for the previous package from Azure. Now they renamed this to be an Azure specific one. So I won't get into detail of all the documentation, but all the deep information you can just access here. I can share this link into the chat, so you are able to see that. Right. So the services, changes in the services. So before, since the connector was mixing both Azure and OpenAI specific services in one, all those Azure related are now part of the Azure package. So if you're specific targeting an Azure one, you would be using in the Azure package now. Text generation deprecation, this was one thing that got so by surprise, but it's something that the new official OpenAI SDK is not supporting anymore. So due to that, we had to drop this support as well. But one point about our semantic kernel is that we have the interface of iText generation on our side. And if you were using that interface before, it will still be working. But the point is that you won't be able to use any text generation specific, what in OpenAI they call the legacy model, anymore due to that. But but if you are using that interface, you'll be able to use that still with no issues there. It's a very, very specific case. And yeah, that was one of the changes. There are another change also due to the same reason from before, very narrow, very specific cases. They dropped the support for multiple choices from the SDK, which we will eventually had to drop as well, in which is very rare. So one thing that you notice is that there is no more these options for multiple results in the execution settings. This was another breaking change, is an avoidable one, which we had to comply. One thing that we implemented before as well is regarding the file service, which is not AI service related. So we dropped that because the new OpenAI client actually provides this file specific client. So it made sense to really dropping this in favor of the SDK specific one, in which you can manipulate the files with ease. There's meta package of semantic kernel. This is a needed change. So what is a meta package? Basically, a meta package is a package that just points to other packages. So if you went into the NuGet org and put semantic kernel there, you don't have to worry about all the specific packages that encompass that semantic kernel package. So meta package is basically that. So if you're using the NuGet org with semantic kernel, automatically you get the semantic kernel core, semantic kernel abstractions, and semantic kernel.openai. With this change, since the OpenAI was including before both Azure and OpenAI related components, we added to this meta package automatically the Azure OpenAI package as well. So this has no, if you were using the meta package, potentially you have no impact in your code at all for using Azure components, unless you are using specifically those packages. So one small thing that happened, and this is related to the chat message content, is for specific types. So our OpenAI specific type within the connector has some has some properties there that were exposing the previous SDK from Azure. And now, since we are using the Open SDK, those properties had to change. And so, for more related to details about that, the same thing happens to the model for streaming. I won't get much into the details here. This is more for specific and advanced scenarios. And one thing that we kept so it avoid any type of breaking changes in the telemetry. So if you're using the new Azure OpenAI package, your metrics will still be the same. So you won't need to change anything regarding telemetry on your side. So another good change about the using Azure, the eighth one is the Azure with your data. Before we had our own implementation, which we call the Azure with data thing, in which you you can provide your data source by your side. And now they have that officially implemented in the Azure SDK package. And the changes are pretty much what we have before and the change you need to do after that. And this is then the 9 item is the most advanced scenario, in which is the breaking glass scenario. So if you are using very specific things from Azure, they change the names on those properties, and we eventually had to change those names on our dictionary of the metadata that comes in our kernel content abstractions. And all of those are related to those metadata and breaking glass scenarios. I won't get too much into the details here, but all of those are more related to breaking glass scenarios. Yes, I think I'm more like open to questions from this point forward. I can just get a little bit. Yeah, so we have the OpenAI client, which was clashing before the Azure SDK. They were calling the OpenAI client with the new name that the OpenAI is calling now, which makes sense. And this probably will be clashing if you are not changing. So that's another observation here. And pipeline configuration. That's a very advanced scenario in which you want to change how your HTTP client will work, how you're going to add handlers into the HTTP client. So it's just a naming convention that they changed. They now use what they call the system client model package as a dependence of OpenAI SDK. So those are very specific scenarios. Yeah, I'm more like open to questions now. If you have any, I'll just stop sharing really quick.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Roger,
Thank
for
you.
going through that. I'm not seeing any in chat right now, but would love to hear from folks if you want to come off of mute questions you may have around the changes and things that are coming with this as well. Yeah, I see we have a hand up if you want to come off of mute.
Hello, thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't know if you can hear me well.
Yeah, we can.
Right, okay. So I've got a rather basic question because I'm just getting started with Semantic Kernel. So recently I just downloaded the repo and then I started with setting up everything. So I used Poetry to set up my environment. But the other day when I started, after a few learning, I just wanted to update my repo and then I noticed that you guys are suggesting a UV. So I started to set up my environment with UV, but I faced some dependencies issues like the one I've just mentioned in the chat. So I'm just wondering, is it best to use Poetry or UV? But also in the same line, as you guys are progressing with the changes, I just wonder like, how do we keep up with like the new updates and stuff so that we can always test things and then make sure we just following the trend? Because it's a bit difficult at some point for like learners like me, for example.
Okay, this
Yeah,
is a
I'm
more
just reading through the
Python.
question. Oh, perfect. Hey, Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. This is a more Python related. If we have any experts to answer that, we appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So, do we have Edward on the call? I don't think we do, right?
I don't
Okay,
think
so
we do.
Okay, I can send some more info about the change that we made away from poetry. But yeah, like that just went in to main very recently. So it looks like you're trying to build stuff from source. So let me find a few documents for you and I can put them into chat and see if that can help.
Yeah, thank you very much. So in the same line, I don't know if I'm on the Python call, the .NET call then, because seems like, but I'll just ask. So since we have the project Tom, which I tried to run, seems not to be working like the way it was working with poetry. I was just wondering, is it possible just to kind of tweak it to make it look like you work with poetry instead of using UV, since the poetry one was working fine for me?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me send you a couple of links and then we can take it from there and follow up on the details.
And then to your second question you had around releases and wanting to see the improvements, we are going through and have release notes on any of our different releases, but then we also have dedicated blogs and docs updates as well. And so just stay tuned with those areas to get updates as well. But yeah, just to clarify, the calls for all languages for Python, for Java, and for .NET as well. So with that, are there any other questions around the OpenAI connector migration guide that Roger presented out, and any other questions people may have on that?
Okay. Feel free to ask anything. Thanks.
Yeah, feel free to put them in chat too, but we can go and move to our open Q&A and go through our all up questions. I see a question around it being GA, and so just wanted to know, I know Evan put a great link and great commented earlier that we are at GA for all languages for Python, Java, and .NET. So we're at 1.0 and beyond for all of them. And so all of them are at that GA where you're not going to have breaking changes and it can be deployed into production environments as well. Was there a specific question that you had around it being GA? Oh, no worries. Are there any other questions folks may have that they want to dive into?
I have a quick question on the GA. So, when we are doing a lot of the C#, there are a lot of alpha libraries that we use with the pragma warning, right? So what is the recommendation? Is it not to use those for production, or would they be breaking changes? Or is that for experimental only? What's the recommendation when we use some of these advanced features with the packages?
Yeah, we do have some of our features that are still in experimental, and so that is some of the ones that you're encountering. I'd recommend that for those, we wait until they get further released outside of experimental, but I'll let the team further elaborate too if there's anything else folks want to add. Perfect. I see we have a hand up. Do you want to go and come off of mute? We'd love to hear from you.
Hi there. I was wondering if you have any plans on implementing the structured outputs from OpenAI. I mean, by permitting users to provide template and to customize the response in a JSON schema format.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Does someone from the team want to dive into that?
Roger, Ben, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't take the question. Can you the question again?
Yep, I was wondering if you have any plans to implement the structured outputs by OpenAI. I saw the OpenAI.NET SDK had the guys already had implemented this feature, but I cannot see any examples within the Semantic Kernel's SDK for the
What is?
structured outputs. Structured
Yeah.
outputs. The new feature they have released a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
Which
I can take, yeah. So
Which
yes, we do have plans to do this. I think this is probably coming in the next probably couple of weeks, at least. It may take a bit longer to get to the function calling structured output, but at least for completions, my guess is it'll probably be out within the next 2 weeks.
So for now, could you suggest to rely on OpenAI's client and implement all the logic within a plugin, or what could we do for instance?
So one thing that I haven't tried that may just work automatically now is like you can add whatever execution parameters you want to the clients already. So you may be able to just set the right execution parameter on the call and it would just work. If not, then yeah, you can definitely sort of break glass and you can configure like the underlying client for it.
Yeah, you can intercept the call using a breaking glass scenario just to provide what is the schema through the official client, basically. But yeah, this is in our pipeline to bring as a support as well.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions folks may have. I see we have a good one actually in chat. Raj, do you want to go and come off of mute? We'd love to hear from you.
It was just a follow-up to my previous question, because I think the semantic kernel agents are really, really good, particularly, for some, they're less complex than AutoGen, and I've had really, really good results trying to use them with some cross, multiple agents communicating, but they're all alpha. So I'm just wondering, I'm working with a partner, they want to use it, and what should be the caution as to whether they're ready for production or they should continue to experiment and wait for it to be released?
Yeah, there's still some additional changes coming, just from what we've seen from OpenAI. We're also working on adding additional agents from other providers out there to make sure that they scale for all types of agents, not just OpenAI agents, but kind of the major 3 or 4 that are out there. So I think that'll continue on probably through Ignite. I think around mid-November, things will start to get locked in between all the providers. What we don't want to do is put it out there and then have an additional breaking change, and then have to go from 1.0 to 2.0 quickly. So we are waiting a little bit there to get those final changes that we hear coming in. And then once that happens, we'll go ahead and 1.0 it. But you should see we've been making a lot of changes on that, or really feature updates recently. You'll see more features coming in as we finish hardening that up and get it close to a 1.0 release over the next couple of months. They can certainly use it, if they find a lot of value, like it sounds like they are. The downside is just to look out for any updates that we communicate that are breaking changes in the package. So if they find value and they want to deploy it, they can. They just need to test before they do auto updates of the package in the future.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the question. Other questions folks may have.
Well, I have another follow-up question. I see a lot of good libraries in this, like, for example, there is one for DuckDB and for Quadrant. but I don't see many examples of how to use those packages with semantic kernels. So it would be good, particularly some of these newer ones. DuckDB is really popular now. And also, I thought that there was a good article on the Pinecone, something similar, for when we are putting these packages to have some examples as well for folks to be able to use them would be good.
Yeah, it's really good feedback. I didn't know if anyone from the team wants to dive into that further, but really appreciate your feedback on that as well. Evan or Ben, anything to add?
Yeah, one of the things, you're right, we'll try to continue to make sample updates, especially for the vector stores. We have a new memory package that's getting to 1.0 soon. So we've been reluctant until we get that wrapped up, which you can test out now that it's out there. So once we get that finalized and for all the vector stores, you'll probably see more samples under the concepts folders for Python and .NET.
Great. And I see a question in chat. Any idea when the Azure AI Search Connector will go GA? It's not directly to some of the work that we're doing within the team, but didn't know if anyone has any updates on that.
Yeah, so Azure AI Search Connector has been recently updated to the new memory design. So currently we are released it as experimental. We are getting early feedback for this kind of functionality. I think we have some examples in our repository, which I will share in the chat later. But I think like the initial plan is to GA all of the available memory connectors with the newly updated memory design by the Ignite event in November. So I think that's the plan. Yeah.
Great. Any follow-up questions with that, with any of the connectors? I know I've seen some questions in GitHub discussions and just didn't know if there are any additional questions folks have on connectors and such. Yeah, if not, I'm not seeing other questions in chat. Does anyone else want to come off of mute with anything that they're going through or any questions? Maybe they're diving into different scenarios. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, this is Arvinda Chopra. A few weeks ago, I had asked a question about kernel memory, and at that time, the news was that there were some discussions happening about that library's future, and so I'm wondering if there's been any new updates regarding that, because we are now heavily depending on kernel memory to be our document ingestion pipeline.
Yeah, I can take that one. We are working with different divisions and teams across Microsoft to find the best home for that. But that is still underway, so no new updates there of a timeline or kind of when that's going to become the full service.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks for the question. Any other questions that you have around memory or any other work that you've been going through as well? No, I'm not seeing other questions in chat. We can give it a few more minutes if folks are typing or coming off of mute. But want to make sure to be respectful of time if there are no other questions as well. So we'll give it a few more minutes just to see if anything comes up.
So I have one another question on the connectors. Do we have any connectors for the semantic kernel Onyx runtime for the CPU?
Yeah, we're in the works. Roger, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on some of the work you've been doing?
So
sorry.
go ahead with the question.
No, yeah, that's it. Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as I understand, we have the Onyx connector, which you can expose to files. We are currently have that one for those scenarios in which use the Onyx runtime to run the models. Yep.
So we do have a Microsoft connector. I know I saw another person had a connector for the CPU and the CUDA connector, but do we have an official connector from Microsoft?
I would say the Onyx would be the way to go on this one, which is a public runtime in which you can use against specific models on your environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's to see that if we can use it with, let's say, Phi3 or something with a, I'm trying to, the partner was trying to do that using Azure Functions and using Azure File Storage to store the model and use the semantic kernel connector to they're trying to reduce the cost instead of using a GPU to see if they can run it on Azure Functions serverless. So that was the scenario that I was just looking for. Like there were other connectors, but there was somebody who had a Onyx Gen AI CPU connector which wasn't working very well. So I was just wondering if there is a Microsoft connector for the CPU for the Onyx runtime. Like Microsoft.semantic kernel.connectors. We have several of them, but I don't believe we have one for the Onyx runtime CPU.
We have an Onyx package, Roger. Should he use that?
Yeah, as far as I understand, the Onyx, the Gen AI should be that the connector. I'm not following up very much why that was not the solution for.
Okay, so yeah, so I see this blog. I'll check that maybe because when I was looking for, I could not find one. There were other connectors, so I'll check to see if in case I'm missing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect. Yeah, Raj, take a look at that. If that doesn't answer your question, feel free to follow back up. And then we also have GitHub discussions. So within our GitHub repo, there's all the discussions that we have. So if you do have additional questions on it after reading through the article that Evan shared out, feel free to reach out there as well if it's outside office hours. I see we have a question from Steven Chat. Does Agent support chat streaming yet? I don't see Chris or others on. Ben or Evan, would you mind diving into that with the agent piece of the support for streaming?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, so did you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I was just going to say that, yeah, we are currently working on streaming for .NET and for Python for agents. It's on the backlog. I can put a link to that in the chat. My guess is that it'll probably be merged to main probably about 2 to 3 weeks from now, is my guess.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, Steve,
Yeah.
would love to hear about your scenario too, if you're able to share out with the audience of what you're looking to do with it too. We're always curious to learn what customers are doing if they're able to.
Yeah, hi. So I've got a multi-agent framework for doing building codes for engineers, and so it's a pretty large data set using some RAG patterns, and it's really complicated because codes reference other codes and other codes, right, in different standards. So multi-agent framework is really great for that. And so I'm actually hoping to be able to have a certain amount of agents just communicate directly, and then have the final curator agent stream the results back to the user. So I'm not sure if that's going to be possible to mix the two outputs once you do have streaming, or do they all have to stream even within their own agent group chat?
Oh yeah, no, having mixed should be totally fine. Yeah, I think like they don't need to stream sort of to each other. But the final
Right.
output should be streamed back to the client. I'm pretty sure that's the default mode that we're building it in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate you elaborating a bit more and going through that as well. Raj, I see you have a question from the connector. Have you looked through the document? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw that, but it was not with the semantic kernel. Like in a lot of the other cases, there is a Microsoft semantic kernel connector, but this one was a generic connector. So I'm just wondering if it can be used with the kernel builder, right? That connector.
Which connector was it again, sir?
The Onyx runtime that somebody put the reference on. I think I did take a look at that .NET main connector.
Mm. I believe so. Roger, do you?
Yeah. Normally, when we implement connectors, we have extension methods for both kernel builder and service collection. And yeah, you potentially can be using as soon as you import that package, you'll be able to use. Yep.
Okay, I'll try that. Thanks. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. And I see we have a comment chat from Ludovic around Discord. Just wanted to kind of level set with the community. We have this weekly office hours for you to join if you have any kind of active questions. We'll usually have a topic too we'll present out. And then in lieu of that, if you're looking to get the team's help and the team's engagement, we primarily go through GitHub discussions. And so we have a daily triage where we go through within a lot of the questions there, just because it's very easy to be able to see the tracking, be able to create an issue from that as well. Discord, we do go through and monitor occasionally. We really are having that more as of a community to community space for learnings as well. And so if you are wanting to get the engineering team engaged, we'd recommend using GitHub discussions as we do go through and actively triage that as well. As we have a hand up, Arvind, if you want to come off of mute.
Hi, this is Arvind Chopra again. So I have some follow-up questions on memory. So my first question is that, is there some discussion happening around like standardization of memory vector schema? For example, if so we are still struggling. So I want to kind of escalate this a little bit. We are struggling with a final solution for document ingestion at scale, right? Where we have petabytes of data. So, we thought kernel memory was maybe the solution, but we could also use, for example, Azure AI Search. However, if I ingest documents using Azure AI Search, is the final the vector database inside the Azure AI Search Index compatible with Semantic Kernel? So can I use Semantic Kernel to query, but use Azure AI Search to ingest? Is that possible? And my second question is, in our company, we have multiple teams doing, the owners of the knowledge repositories, whether it's engineering standards or some other knowledge bases. They are ingesting documents using Azure AI Search, but in order to build applications, I may need to stitch together more than one knowledge store. So is it possible or is there some feature forthcoming that can allow me from Semantic Kernel to reach out to multiple vector databases at the same time in parallel in response to a question or a query?
Yeah, good questions. I'll start and then the team can jump in. I think we're yes on all of those. So we can query Azure AI Search. We have an awesome connector for that. That's being updated also right now with the new memory package that'll be coming out. So right now the memory package supports ingestion. We did that so that way kernel memory can pick it up and make the abstractions easier for any vector store. So that's out today. Search is coming. There's a bunch of PRs that are in right now that we're going through to make sure that it's going to scale and do things. Like, for example, in Azure Search, you can have different indexes. So we want to make sure we can support, all different types there. Thank you, Roger, for the link. And then, yeah, so you can set up as many vector stores as you want. You need to define the description of when the agents or when AI should pick one versus another, right? So especially at your organization, like I said, you have lots of data, lots of different vector stores. You may say, okay, this one is for, has information on drilling. This one has information on, customer data. This one has information on employees. And that way the agent can go and query through a plugin in the memory package the right one, and you can combine those together if you need to. So Dimitri, anything, thanks for putting in the links there. And Roger, anything else we should call out there?
No, I think that's right. The examples that I shared, they include the code how to ingest the data into vector store. And it also, there's an example how to use multiple vector stores at the same time. And also there's an example how to implement your custom mapper, because in each vector store implementation, we have some default mapping logic. For example, if you have some specific requirements for your records in vector store and you need to handle schema differently, you can implement your custom mapper and handle the situation very easily. But the idea of the memory abstractions in semantic kernel is that you can define your database schema using simple C# type. For example, you can use class, you can put some properties there, and then you can name them, for example, and then this schema will be used, this C# type will be used to create your database collection using specific property types and their names. And again, you can use custom mapper to handle the data ingestion in a specific way if you need. But in general, like answering your question, Azure AI Search underlying vector database is supported by semantic kernel, and then there is functionality that allows you to support multiple vector stores at the same time. I'm not sure. So those examples that I shared, they include Quadrant and Redis databases. I'm not sure if Azure AI Search example is there, but we are working to add more examples and more documentation whenever it's possible. And then last week we also released 2 more connectors with this new updated memory design, which is MongoDB and NoSQL connector. Sorry, it's like Cosmos DB for MongoDB and Cosmos DB for NoSQL connectors. And we are in progress of VV8 memory store connector, and there will be more added in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for the question. Just have some follow-ups from Ludovic. Do you want to go and come up, and we would love to hear from you of some of your thoughts? If not, I can go and read out your comment from chat as well. It was to Ben's reply back with the Python switch from poetry to UV. And you were mentioning that there are some requirements to for make, but not for or how it works in Google or in others. And so you're wanting to find out a little bit more with UV. And so I'd love to be able to dive in and understand a little bit more of your question.
Actually, it wasn't a question. I mean, I think you just answered that, but it was more to follow on what I said earlier. When you use the new repo, I just had the confirmation that I don't need to actually pull the main repo to do all that. It was just like just as a learning curve to keep up with what the new updates. So it was just like, okay, if we need to use UV now, how does it work and how do you get it set up? So on the setup MD, it's just like general information, and then I wasn't able to understand how to set up the make version of it. So it seems to be more for Linux, but when I was reading the release, it seems like there's a specific way to use make and there's a specific way to use UV as well, because apparently you just use UV and run your Python script, which is something different to what I used to do. But I think it's just a learning curve. So it wasn't like a question, but just to confirm the way we should use like the main repo and then the new release to keep up with the changes. And also,
Makes sense. I think we also, I'll paste a link for you too for Python. We have some quick getting started notebooks. So that may be a good way to just to kind of check out of getting started there. And then we've also been updating our Learn site. I'll put a link in there for you too. And you can pick which language you want, which is nice. So that way you can just say, okay, I want Python. And then you can go through all the samples and things in Python.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for posting those in, Evan. Rory, do you want to go and come off of mute?
I put it in the chat, Ludovic. I just wanted to confirm, there is wanting to contribute towards SK, the library, right? Where you would pull from Git and need to get your dev environment set up, poetry, UV, all of that. But if you're building an app and you just want to use SK as a library, then you need none of that, right? You're just going to pip install or NuGet in the library and then write your code. So maybe you already knew that. Maybe that's obvious. Apologies. I just wanted to point it out.
no, that's cool, man. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks for the clarification. Thanks for the question, both of you as well. And going through, Raj, do you want to go and come off from here? I see your question around the multiple vector stores and love to hear from you.
Oh, no, it's just a curiosity. I didn't realize that you could actually use semantic kernel to connect to multiple vector database. And I was just thinking about, somebody asked, I'm wondering, what is the scenario where is it that different documents are in different stores? And then when you have a query, how would you go to all this multiple vector store and get the results and then aggregate them? What is the scenario, or how would you use this?
We see customers doing this, not necessarily all the time, different vector stores, but more about, let's say, we'll pick on Azure AI Search since that was called out earlier. So within Azure AI Search, you can have different indexes. So you could say, well, here's an index for, this division's data or this project's data, however you want to do it there. And then that way, based on the intent of the user, or even based on the user themselves, like, oh, my user works in this division, so I'm going to go and actually look at their record and graph, see where they work, see maybe their region, whatever, right? And then filter down and say, oh, okay, because of these properties, let's go and call this index within Azure Search only. So it's a good way to be able to route around. The other thing that's interesting that a lot of people kind of miss, which is a lot of the power of semantic kernel, is we can do different vector stores. So if you have that, especially for multinational organizations that might have different technology across different divisions, or even from EMEA, but you can also do different models. So you can use different models within a kernel. You can register all those and then use those for different scenarios too. So you're not just locked into one model or one vector store, but you can use really a mix and match based on what you want to do for your use case.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's very interesting, because you could also, if someone already has a vector store, and let's say if you're building a solution with another store, but to your point, it needs to be routed, right? So you need to know which one to go. So there has to be some upfront a routing mechanism to say, okay, if this is the query, then it's in this, then I'll go do the search and get the results from that vector store. Yeah.
That's right.
Just to add a little bit more, I think like those abstractions which allows you to basically to use multiple vector stores at the same time. They also useful not only in production environments, but also in local or testing environments when you want to quickly experiment with some vector store. For example, in production, you just need only one, but you need to decide which one, whether you want to use Quadrant or Redis. So you can write some abstracted code which will do some data ingestion and query using some abstract vector store, and then in one line you can quickly switch between them if you want to see how each vector store performs, and then decide specific database in your production database, in your production application, sorry. And I think this is also very useful, and I think it's very similar to the scenario which Entity Framework in .NET handles, right? Because Entity Framework supports a lot of relational databases, but usually in production scenarios, you use just one, whether it's SQL Server or any other relational database, right? But the point here is that as a .NET developer, you don't need to jump into specifics of each database, because as soon as you learn Entity Framework, you can use it and you can work with multiple databases. And for example, if you switch to another product, for example, or start a new project, you don't need to spend time to learn new database if there are some specific business requirements to use another database, right? You just use Entity Framework and you're ready to go. So we look at our memory abstractions for vector stores in the same way. For example, if in one project you need to use Quadrant, you can use Semantic Kernel. You can write some code to access Quadrant database, to ingest your data, to query. But then if, for example, in another project you need to use Redis or Chroma, for example, you don't need to learn their specific API to work with it. You don't need to spend some time on this. You can just use semantic kernel abstractions and basically write the same code, which will work with another database. So I think this is useful as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so it's kind of a, like to your point, like the ORM layer type of thing, an abstraction for that vector database. Do we keep up? Do we keep up with the? Let's say the Quadrant has 1.11.1. When you have a semantic kernel Quadrant connector, does that need to be updated whenever they change their releases?
I think it shouldn't be updated unless they provide some breaking changes. So basically we have integration tests set up in our infrastructure. And in those integration tests, we try to, basically we download the latest Docker image from their Docker Hub, right? And then we are, so basically every time we're running integration tests, we are running them against their latest Quadrant version. So if there will be some breaking changes, which will be incompatible with semantic kernel connector, we should be able to get this information as soon as possible during the first integration test run. And we run them with every pull request merge basically to the main branch. And since as soon as we will see this kind of incompatibility, we will fix it as soon as possible. And then you will be able to download the latest semantic kernel connector with the fixes, and you should be fine. But we didn't notice this kind of situations so far when VectorDB provider releases some breaking changes, so we are impacted basically. There were some situations with Chroma database, but it was like long time ago, and at the moment like we don't see such incompatibilities. But in case there will be such situations in the future, this is the workflow. We will catch it in our integration tests, we will fix our connector, we will release a patch, and that should be it.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest value that our customers are looking to us to do is, look, you don't have to worry about, I mean, we have hundreds of SDKs, right, that we sit on top of. So that's the awesome power of Semantic Kernel is you just use Semantic Kernel, we'll do all the rest for you. You just continue to work and run in production, and we'll update as need be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We're coming to the end of our office hours time. Are there any final questions folks have to close this out with? If not, I just want to thank everyone for your time. Really appreciate you joining to the office hours and asking all good questions and feedback, and for the Semantic Kernel team for joining as well and diving into those. And we'll see you again next week for our office hours. If you have questions in between, feel free to ask them in GitHub discussions and we'll get back to you as well. Thanks, everyone.